Welcome to Boiler Ball postgame in the lounge here on Lounge Sports Network. I'm Grant Flora here with Dustin Schutte, and the Boilermakers played at Rutgers tonight in Piscataway, New Jersey. They came away with the win 81-65. Dustin, a great performance, a great night of basketball on this Tuesday night, and the Boilermakers had a pretty good game.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You said 81-65, and I wrote it in my story multiple times. But it didn't feel like a night where they scored 81 points. It was kind of slow paced. I thought Rutgers kind of controlled the tempo in a sense of Purdue was willing to kind of slow down a little bit and get good shots and execute their offense. But just seeing 81, it feels weird. Like, you saw the shot. They shot really well. They rebounded the ball well. They didn't turn it over. But it didn't feel like a game where they scored 81 points.
Yeah, I don't think you really saw the fireworks as much as far as just like this kind of, I don't know, fast-paced run type of game that we were used to with like Texas Tech and Eastern Illinois. So, but yeah, it was just kind of a sneaky 81. But to me, this felt like a game where some guys weren't quite playing their best, but some guys had some really great nights, and the guys that had the great nights kind of carried the load, and it kind of shows the depth of this team, but also just kind of the way that they're going to be able to do this on a night-to-night basis of whoever kind of has the hot hand going to do a really good job tonight. It was Braden Smith and Jakari Harris, as well as TKR in the post.
Yeah, I think that their depth really it seems like each game their depth kind of shows, right? Like I feel it sounds weird, but like it's just there's a constant reminder that Braden Smith can take over a game whenever he wants. And it kind of felt like, I don't remember what the shot selection was early in the game, but I know Rutgers hit a few quick threes to kind of set the table there early, and Braden just kind of took it upon himself and was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go toe to toe with these guys. And he knocked down his first three shots from 3-point range, and at one point it was Braden had 9, Rutgers had 8. And so it just kind of felt like he decided to get the team going a little bit. And then once he knocked down some shots, then other shots started to fall. I thought he was kind of surgical in his work tonight. Like, he was picking his spots. He was very intentional about what he's doing. Not that he's not usually, but he just seemed to be like picking his spots really well tonight. He was scoring really well in the first half. Then in the second half, he kind of switched it up and was getting his teammates involved and dissected that Rutgers defense with his passing ability. That behind the back pass he had to Oscar Clough for the easy dunk was something we saw in like I think it was the scrimmage before the exhibition games. Like, they did those, 7-minute scrimmages or 12-minute scrimmages, whatever it was. So to see him do that in a game, and I know we've seen a number of great passes from him, but I thought he was just outstanding. For a second straight game, it's really good to see Jakari Harris see the shots go in, because he was a kid that struggled, and he kind of had the same struggles last year as a freshman. You thought he might start a little bit hotter out of the gate this year, just simply because, he had that full year of experience. Maybe he's got a little bit more confidence. He's a little bit more comfortable in the offense. He only gets 5 shots, but he goes 3 of 4 from 3. And this is kind of like what Matt Painter talks about. You may not get a ton of opportunities throughout the course of a game. He may only get 3 to 6 shots per game. But if you have those guys who they don't have to score a lot, but if they can shoot it that efficiently, what a weapon it is. And especially, I think I want to say 9 or 11 of his points came in the first half. I didn't have it broken down by half there, but he had a good chunk of his scoring in the first half when Purdue kind of needed it most.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty confident he and Braden both had 11 leading the way at halftime. So, he did a great job. Sam and I kind of talked in the preview of this that we recorded for the game today about the importance of kind of keeping Rutgers and their fans out of the game, because if you let them stick around, especially with the stigma of like Rutgers hosting number 1 Purdue, the longer they stick around, obviously the more dangerous they become. And so I thought Purdue did a great job kind of establishing themselves early. And then when Rutgers made that 10-0 run to cut it down, they get down to 20-19 at one point, or at least 20-17. They then responded with the 10-0 run of their own. I thought that was kind of a pivotal moment they kind of took the fans out of it a bit, and then they kind of ran with it from there. And by the time second half got a few minutes in, like the game was pretty much well in hand. So they did a great job with that, and Jakari was a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, they withstood that push, and I think when it was 20-9, people are probably feeling pretty good, right? You're watching this game, you're saying, okay, this is how we should be playing. And by the way, I thought the way Purdue started, they were physical. Like, this is a game that usually Rutgers kind of tries to set the tone and be the aggressor and be intimidating in some ways. I just didn't feel like I thought Oscar Clough, even though he didn't collect a lot of those rebounds, he was around the ball a lot and wasn't getting bodied by some of those, Emmanuel Ogbole, who has been one of their really good interior players. I thought obviously Trey Kaufman-Renn once again was attacking the glass really strong and had obviously 13 by the end of the night. But I do think that when it got to 2019, you probably heard like a collective groan amongst Purdue fans like that. Here we go again. We're letting Rutgers linger around, hang around. We're the number one ranked team. It's the first Big Ten road game, which coming into today, they were 2-6 in these early December games on the road. But then they responded, and it gets to 30-19, and I think the crowd was still a little bit into it. But after halftime, it was dead. There was no energy in that building. And at halftime, it was only a 13-point game. It was 40-27. And I think that just speaks to when you get down to Purdue, it's really hard to dig yourself out of a hole if you get down to Purdue, because they just have so many weapons that even if you go on a run, you got to expect that they're going to bounce back and fight back. And that's what we saw tonight a couple different times.
Yeah, you mentioned the physicality. If you look at the total foul count, Purdue had 14 total personal fouls. Rutgers had 18. So kind of even, but at the same time, neither of those numbers are that big. But I feel like even early in the first half and early in the second half, Rutgers was the team picking up those fouls. Purdue wasn't getting them as much. Purdue was getting into the bonus and double bonus. So I think Purdue did a good job being physical without having too many silly fouls. And I think you got a little sloppier towards the end of the game as the deficit started to get bigger and you got closer to the end of the game. But I thought for sure they did a good job of that. I thought their defense kind of was solidified because of that, despite a couple small little possessions or maybe they messed up. But for sure, their physicality. Another thing that Sam and I talked about in the preview was kind of how Purdue was going to deal with Dylan Grant, right? Because he was a 6'8" kind of wing type player, the type of player that even from the beginning of the season, when you talk about Purdue and something that could cause them problems, this was the type of guy that we thought could potentially do that. So what did you kind of see with Grant and how Purdue handled him? And if you thought really there was a whole lot there?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at Dylan Grant and the way he plays, it's very similar to some other guys that Purdue has played this season. And I'm going to blank on his name. I think maybe Keyshawn Porter from Evansville is another. He was a big guard who likes to get into the paint. He's super athletic. And I think if you allow Dylan Grant to to set the tone, he's the guy that can be a spark plug, kind of like, a guy who can really kind of almost like a Miles Colvin. Like if he makes one really big dunk or a big athletic play, it can kind of, jumpstart his team or get the energy flowing. Purdue didn't really allow him to do that. And I think that was huge. Like I thought Purdue's interior defense, I don't know what the numbers were here. I'm looking here at the points in the paint, 24. And that's a big win. And Rutgers is a team that, they live in the paint. This is what Purdue has to defend against this team specifically. Like I thought early on when they hit those 2 threes, that's a good sign for Purdue. Like if Rutgers if they fall in love with the 3-point shot or, if they hit a couple early threes and their confidence is sky high, that's going to be a good sign for Purdue for the reason of Rutgers is not a really good shooting team. They can't hit those shots from the perimeter at a high clip. So I thought that was a positive. But in terms of Dylan, just nobody was able to get going in the post. And I just thought that their interior defense was a major strength for them tonight.
Yeah. Rutgers did make a starting lineup change. When what they usually have been doing from what it looked like was Dylan Grant was playing the 3, and he was kind of that 6'8" forward at the 3 spot. And so we kind of came into this with the question of, okay, how does Purdue handle that? Are they going to put CJ Cox on him? How are they going to scheme him a little bit? They actually made a change in their starting lineup. They actually moved Grant down to the 4 from what it looked like. And Battlelow, who was, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Dennis Battlelow is the guy who had been starting and actually came out of the starting lineup, only played 4 minutes and 2 points. I'm not super familiar with how Rutgers plays and whatnot, but to me, that's kind of significant because we had this matchup that we thought could be an interesting thing for Purdue to handle, and instead it turned into just Grant being played at the 4. So that was kind of a surprise to me, and I kind of wish we'd gotten to see Grant at the 3 more, but curious maybe to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's one that I didn't actually pick up, so I'm glad that you pointed that out. I would probably have to go back and watch and notice that, but that's not something I really picked up on. I think like those two guys are their 2 best rebounders, so my guess is that they wanted to try to, as much as they could, compete with Purdue on the glass. And the best way to do that is to put your 2 top rebounders and your 2 biggest guys, because you're going to obviously have Agbole there at the 5. And then Grant is, it seems like a weird spot to put him in for this game, because I think Purdue has players who can guard. I think Jakari and CJ can defend him, and I think you could probably throw Fletcher in there and would be able to defend him. And if he gets around you, you've still got Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson at the rim. But my guess is that's some sort of rebounding perspective, because again, he's not a guy that shoots the ball. I think he had come into this game, he had shot like 15 or 16 3-pointers, something. It's a really low number. It's less than 20. And so you're probably thinking, we can't shoot really well. The best opportunity we're going to have is if we can compete on the glass and maybe grab some of those offensive boards. If we can steal some from Clough, Jacobson, Kaufman-Renn, or get those guys, like they did have Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson in foul trouble. Like if this was a closer game and Rutgers had another big body who could rebound, Purdue might have been in some trouble, because those 2 guys both had 2 fouls before half. So I think that was probably part of their strategy. Try to get them in foul trouble, try to steal some offensive rebounds and get some shots at the rim, or at least get to the foul line. This is a team that shoots a lot of free throws per game. So I think that was just probably part of their strategy, and they probably thought Grant was going to be the second best option in terms of their rebounding, and they wanted him as close to the basket as they could possibly get for those second chance opportunities.
Yeah, on that note, it's great to see Liam Murphy get back in and even just knock down that 1-3, especially because we did not see Jack Benter tonight. I didn't catch what the reason for that was, but no Benter. Yep. And then the other thing about, before we get even more into that, you're talking about the rebounding for Rutgers. I thought it was interesting that Rutgers was zoning Purdue at times, right? I didn't catch the minutes of how much zone they played, but they were definitely playing zone on Purdue at one point, which to me, I'm thinking Purdue's one of the best shooting teams in the country and one of the best rebounding teams in the country. Doesn't seem like a great idea to zone them, but that's what we saw.
Well, one of the things that I had heard being discussed was like Rutgers is just going to throw out a lot of different defensive things to try to mix up, a lot of different coverages to try to throw Purdue off. It just didn't work. Maybe it did for a possession or 2 in a row, because again, this is really weird of me to say, and this is a little off topic, but sorry, I keep clearing my throat tonight for whatever reason. And now I've lost my train. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So it seemed like for a 20-point game, I don't know if anybody else watching or if you, Grant, if it felt like Rutgers was just lingering. Like and I never thought that they were going to win the game, like make a big push, but they always seem to stay within that like 16 to 22 point range. And I thought that this could have been a 35 or 40 point win for Purdue, but they just didn't let it run away. I just think tonight Rutgers got to a point where they were like, we know we're not talented enough to beat Purdue. We got to mix some things up and hope that we can confuse them. So they probably threw man-to-man. They probably threw some zone. I don't know if they went box and one. There was a thought that they might try to implement that and try to get the ball out of Braden Smith's hands or double him. I think that they were just trying to mix some things up, and see what worked. And if something worked in terms of a zone, it is interesting because of how good of a rebounding team Purdue is that you would go with that method. But I think it's just at some point Steve Peichel knows, hey, I'm going to try a lot of different things here. And if something works, then maybe we can stick with it.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a good explanation for that, because obviously Purdue was able to figure that out pretty well. But like we talked about, Liam Murphy came in, knocked down one shot. He only took one shot, just the one. I think it was when Purdue went small ball. I think the first time we've seen Purdue go small ball in actual meaningful minutes, with TKR at the 5 and Liam Murphy at the 4. And as soon as they did that, it turned out a Liam Murphy 3 at that stretch 4 position. So thought that was pretty cool. But again, we didn't see Jack Benter tonight, so I didn't catch that before the game until we were obviously watching it. What did you hear about Jack?
Yeah, just an illness, I guess, kept him sidelined for the day. So they basically just swapped spots where Liam came back and Jack was on the bench. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I made the comment, like, Liam Murphy was out the last 2 games. I don't know when I think he's gone through practice maybe the last week or so, or last couple days. And then he steps in and knocks down the first shot he's taken since he's come back. So that just shows you how, like, that's a clutch ability. To be able to do that is a really good ability, and it's another shooter that Purdue has. The other thing that I thought, and I noticed this on his first or second possession that he was in the game on the defensive end, he didn't really do anything crazy, but he was down in the post, and I think he was guarding Dylan Grant, and they were going at each other. I mean, they were, shoulder to shoulder, and Liam's had those shoulder problems, and I'm kind of sitting there like, oh boy, don't, at this point, you just don't want to get hurt. But he was not afraid of the physicality. So to me, it tells me he's at 100% full strength. He tried to chase down that rebound, and I think he drew a foul. I don't remember who the foul was on the Rutgers side. So, sometimes I think everybody looks at the stat column and it's just like looking at how many points did they score? How many shots did they take? How many rebounds did they get or assists did they? And sometimes, especially when it comes to guys like Liam Murphy and Jack Benter, who are only going to play, 6 to maybe 12 minutes on a good day, you kind of look for those little things, and those little things make winning plays. And like I said, Liam Murphy didn't back away when he had every reason. I'm sure coming off of a shoulder injury, probably there's reason to be skittish and maybe not play the type of physical basketball that you need. But he comes in, he immediately gets physical, draws a foul and a potential rebound, and then knocks down a triple. So it's just little plays like that I think separate Purdue. And it may not look like it in the final score, but it makes a big difference and kind of sets the tone for your team throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, and that's key, especially when you're on the road in an environment like Rutgers. So, I thought that was really good to see from him, especially because he seems like the type of player when he's at the stretch 4 that his vulnerability might be the fact that a physical, bigger 4 like a Dylan Grant could potentially try and go at him a little bit. So to see him kind of fighting through that and not really being exploited in that way was pretty good to see from Murphy. But overall, just good to see him back on the court. Good to see him back in rhythm, because he's a player that ever since he transferred in, we felt like could make that impact and kind of be that stretch 4 position. And to see Purdue go to that look of we're going to play a little bit smaller, put TKR back at the 5 and spread the floor a little bit more with a Liam Murphy type player, I thought was just really interesting, because we haven't seen that so far this year. So it just shows the options that Purdue has, right? Because they have the 2 centers that can come in and play interchangeably, but then they also have this other look that we've kind of speculated about, but haven't seen until tonight. So, I really get from them. Go ahead.
I was just going to chime in and say, I thought it was because I believe at that time, both Clough and Jacobson had 2 fouls. So that kind of forced their hand a little bit there to go with that smaller lineup. But I think, to your point, that's not a bad thing, especially in a game like this, because you're probably going to get into another Big Ten game at some point down the road where your hand is forced like that. You'd like to think that Oscar Clough and Trey Kaufman-Renn Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson can play without those 2 fouls, but there may be situations where teams are super aggressive and maybe they can't get out of foul, like they just get into foul trouble. So you have to go smaller. And so I think that having these stretches where you have to go, and I don't remember how long it was. I don't think it was terribly long, but if you're able to go 3 to 5 minutes twice a game where you have that small ball lineup and still be productive, I think that's a really good thing. So getting in this, this little bit of this experimentation here in a game like this, I think is only beneficial down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like especially these games where Purdue gets a nice lead and kind of has some 10 to 15 minutes in the second half where they feel comfortable can just be really helpful for these guys like Omer Meyer and Jakari Harris. Some of those guys that maybe haven't gotten in that rhythm but can keep building confidence. I think we saw that for sure. And even guys like CJ Cox tonight. This was not CJ Cox's night. Went 1 of 5 from the field. Still had 6 points, but I just felt like a lot of the shots he made and like the Baha Mar, even in the game against Eastern Illinois, just didn't fall for him. But still being able to just get more minutes out there and play confidently was really good from them. So kind of as we look at this game overall, what other major thoughts do you have as we kind of put a bow on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we went this whole show basically without talking about Trey Kaufman-Renn,
Right.
and he was the most productive player on the court in terms of his stat line: 19 points, 7 of 11, 13 rebounds, 3 assists. And I think that's a little bit. I don't think that's us disrespecting him. I think it's a credit to him because it's almost become expected of him. But I did think, much like the Alabama game earlier this year, he came in and got, I think it was 2 quick rebounds early in the first half, and it kind of set the tone because one of them I know he had to chase out of bounds and save it. And I think when you have plays like that, like he just seems like he's on a completely different level right now. And I don't remember this type of energy from him last season. I think there was 1 or 2 games where he like tried to get the crowd fired up. Indiana was one, UCLA was another. Maybe there's another one out there. But he just seems like he's playing like, this is a football analogy, like with his hair on fire. And I think that when you have a player like that who knows what's at stake, he's playing in his final season, wants to be the best player, wants to be the best competitor, wants to be the most physical player on the floor, I think that really just sets the tone. And so that's why I think, again, from the opening jump, Purdue was ready to embrace physicality. They were ready to attack the glass. I think Trey Kaufman-Renn is a big part of that. And he had another incredible stat line. But if there's a night when he scores 8 points, but he just brings that type of, like, I think Oscar Clough and some of those other guys, I think they just feed off of it. So more than anything, I just love his energy that he's brought through these first 6 games that he's played in.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with his rebounding compared to previous years, like he's just using more tools to get rebounds, whether it's like, it feels like whenever he gets his hands on the ball, like he's the one that ends up with it. He's not just like batting it around, knocking it one direction or the other. Like he's coming up with it and corralling it. Also, I feel like he's kind of just jumping and using his athleticism more to get himself in positions to rebound instead of just relying on a box out and the ball kind of coming to him. Like he's actually, I think, a bit more active as far as just flat out getting the ball. And I think that's been as big of a contributor as anything to his rebounding numbers, in addition to the fact that he's rebounding against 4s instead of 5s and all the things that we've talked about since he's come back. But yeah, he continues to put up those awesome rebounding numbers despite kind of the stigma the first 3 years of him not being a major rebounder. He's flipped that script and he's averaging a double-double this season. So good to see him kind of staying consistent and yeah, setting that tone for Purdue when you're going into a road environment. You talked about in an article before the game how Purdue struggled in their first like road openers in Big Ten play. I think about Penn State last year and Northwestern the year before. It's become a thing for Purdue to kind of struggle on the road early, but tonight they did pretty well.
Yeah, I was thoroughly impressed. Like I said, they had that one run where they allowed Rutgers to go on a 10-0 scoring run and get them back in the game, but they immediately responded, and that's what you want to see. The other thing I will say, and I've mentioned this, I don't remember if you were on for this post game or not. I mentioned it to Sam, I know that, but like it's underrated. I think it's an underrated skill, and people don't, maybe they take this for granted. The way Kaufman-Renn is able to catch off, whether it's a rebound, whether it's a lob pass, the way he looks the ball into his hand, it's like to me, that's an underrated skill because if he gets a hand on the basketball, it feels like it's a vice grip. Like it's not going anywhere. He's got it. And I think that's such an underrated skill because it probably saves Purdue. We're probably not talking like 6 or 7 possessions, but it might save them 2 or 3 possessions a game. And again, when you're going to have to play Iowa State, Auburn, Michigan State, some of those other teams down the road, that's an underrated skill. The other thing I wanted to point out too was Kaufman-Renn's passing tonight was outstanding. He had some really good lob passes. I think 2 of them got converted into dunks. I don't remember if it was all 3, but he was we've always known he's been a good passer. I thought he was elite in that, even though he only had 3 assists. I thought his passing was elite. I thought the whole team did an excellent job. I think their ball movement, when you have a team like Rutgers who is wanting to keep you out of the lane at all costs and not let you drive to the lane, I think Purdue did have some trouble driving and getting to the basket, but their ball movement is what stymied Rutgers. They were able to create open shots, whether that was a 3, whether that was something at the basket, lob threat. I just thought Kaufman-Renn had a really good passing game. Obviously, Braden did an excellent job, but this team's ball movement really from the start of the game until the end of the game was outstanding and a big reason why they had a 16-point win tonight.
Yeah, I feel like we saw a couple more of those plays with the Braden Smith pocket pass to TKR, and I feel like anytime they get to that, it just creates those situations where they're like 4-on-3 or 3-on-2, and TKR is doing a great job making those reads, like the lob to Jacobson, or sometimes he sprays it out for a 3. And those are the types of plays that no matter who you're playing against and what kind of defense they're playing, when you get to those situations where you have a man up basically because the other 2 are out guarding Braden Smith and you make the right read, there's really nothing they can do to stop you. So it's great to see those types of plays. TKR had another masterful performance. And back to your point too about him being able to look the ball into his hands basically and hold on to it. It's so impressive as well and so helpful when you have a guy like Braden Smith that makes some of those flashier passes. That I only say that because sometimes it's hard to know that he's going to pass you the ball. You're not expecting it. You're expecting him to shoot or expecting him to go to a different guy, but then he gets it to you. So you got to be able to react and hold on to it, or else it's not really worth it because you can't catch the ball. You're just going to turn it over anyway. So I feel like TKR is well practiced in being able to receive those passes and hold on to the ball, like you said. So great performance from TKR, great performance from these Boilermakers that overall, really. And any other thoughts before we sign it off?
I think we pretty much touched on everything. I don't know if I have anything else to add to that. Like, just an all around really good performance. I think that there were times when Purdue could have let Rutgers get back into the game, and they just didn't. And I think that was a really impressive start. And I think it tells you that this team, they did. I think I'll kind of close on this. I think there's every reason to go into this type of game nervous. I don't want to say scared because I think that's too strong, but maybe nervous, have a few butterflies. Matt Painter talks about that competitive fear. You want to have that, so that way, if you're afraid of losing, that's going to drive you a little bit. But I think in this game, when you look at, Rutgers has beat us, twice when we've been ranked number 1, one time here, one time at Mackey. We haven't played well in these Big Ten openers before. It's probably easy to look ahead to that Iowa State game on Saturday. I just thought that they got off. I think they got off the bus and they were locked in and they were focused. They are legitimately taking it one game at a time, and just a really, really solid performance for your first Big Ten road game of the year in a not so fun in a place that can be not so fun environment. By the end, I think they thought it was just practice because it was awfully quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to go to Piscataway and get a win, especially one by double figures. So once again, final score: Purdue 81, Rutgers 65. A key win for the Boilermakers to start out Big Ten play. Like you said, they're back in action on Saturday at noon on CBS, if I'm not mistaken, against the number 10 Iowa State Cyclones. Should be an electric atmosphere in Mackey Arena and another top 10 showdown in Mackey. I think the last time it was a top 10 showdown was when they beat number 9 Illinois a couple of years ago. I could be wrong on that, but that's from just off the top of my head. That's kind of what sounds right. So going to be another fun one in Mackey to get back to some non-conference play. But this has been Grant Flora and Dustin Schutte. Again, we'll see you for an episode on Friday previewing Iowa State. So long from Boilermaker post game in the lounge.